you?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Audible.
Yes, sir. And my screen is also visible to all of you, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So let us start discussing something new, which is related to our web application. www.root folder, which is also called as a WebRoot folder. So what is WebRoot folder? What is the importance of WebRoot folder? How you can create the WebRoot folder? What are the things you can put inside the WebRoot folder? Can you rename this WebRoot folder in ASP.NET Core application? If yes, then how you can use, how you can rename and how you can use, how you can configure. So all these things we are going to discuss in today's session. So what is this WebRoot folder in ASP.NET Core? By default, the WebRoot folder in ASP.NET Core application is treated as the WebRoot folder. That means it is the root folder of your web application, right? And where you can place all the static files of your application, right? So whatever static files you are going to create it, like CSS, JavaScript, some libraries, some HTML files, some images, any kind of static files you want to create in your application. Those static files should be created either directly within this webroot folder or any subfolder of this webroot folder. And more importantly, this webroot folder should be present in the project root directory, right? So when you create a new ASP.NET Core Web application, either using the Web API template or using the model view controller template, right? Then by default, this folder is going to be created at the project root directory. But if you are creating a new ASP.NET Core application with the empty project template, then by default you will not find this webroot folder, right? This webroot folder is not going to be created by Visual Studio if you are using an empty template. But if you are using Web and MVC template, then by default this folder is going to be available, right? So as we are discussing the basic concept where we are developing the application from scratch, let's start developing one application using empty project template, and then I will show you how you can add this webroot folder and how you can add content inside it and all those things, right? Let me create a new project. Selecting ASP.NET Core empty, give any meaningful name to your application. Select the location where you want to create the project. If you want, you can give the same solution name as the project name, or else you can give a different name. Then click on the next button. Select the .NET 6, right? Configure HTTPS if you want to enable HTTPS protocol to access your application. Currently, we are not interested with Docker concept, so I am on checking this one. Do not use the top level statement. I'm checking this one because I want to explicitly create the program class and the main method for our application. Then just click the create button. So once you click the create button, then you will see that the project is going to be created, but you can see there is no webroot folder. But at the same time, if you are going to create the MVC application, or by if you are creating the web API application, then by default Visual Studio is going to add the webroot folder, right? Or webroot folder in the sense www root folder. Now let's say how you can create the webroot folder. So for that, what you need to do, right? So just create a folder, right click on your application. The webroot folder should be created at the project root directory, and this is my project root directory. So just right click, add new folder. So what you need to do, right click on your project, select the option add new folder, and once you provide the new folder, right, it will create a new folder. Give the name as a www root, and once you give the name as a www root, then you can see the symbol is changed to web. The symbol is changed to web, right? So this is nothing but your folder, or webroot folder for your application, right? So once you make this folder as webroot, then automatically the folder symbol is changed to this webroot. Then what the webroot folder is going to contain in a ASP.NET Core, right? Suppose as I already mentioned, any static file for your application, if you want to create some CSS, some JavaScript file, right? You are installing some third-party libraries like Bootstrap, jQuery, right? Web icon, images, HTML pages, right? Any static files you want for your application, that you need to create within this webroot folder, right? Directly at the webroot level, you can create. That is fine. But even though, but a good programming practice is to create a separate folder, right? In separate subfolder for each type of files. Right? Suppose example, I'm going to create 5 CSS files for my application. You can create a subfolder CSS within the webroot folder. Inside that subfolder, you can write the CSS files like CSS1, right? Site1, site2, whatever the name you want to give, that you can put. Similarly, you want to create some JavaScript file for your application, you can create a JS folder or JavaScript folder within this WebRoot folder, and within that folder, you can write your site JavaScript code, right? For example, you want to implement Bootstrap in your application, jQuery in your application, then you can install the libraries, right? And you can install them inside this lib folder. Even though you can put the five icon directly at the root level, you can create a folder called images, right? Inside that images folder, whatever images required for your application, you can put there, right? Even though you can create HTML files within whatever static HTML files required for your application within this webroot folder. Then the question is, what is the advantages of putting this webroot folder, putting these static files inside this webroot folder? Guys, remember, unlike the earlier version of application, right? If you remember, if you work with a MVC, ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Web API, then you can access the static file from anywhere, right? Anywhere you can put the static file in your application and you can access them directly. But this is not possible with ASP.NET Core. In ASP.NET Core, if you want to access the static file, right, then you should put them inside the webroot folder. If you are not putting them inside the webroot folder, then you can't access them. It will block, right? So how it is blocked, how you cannot access, practically we'll see. For example, suppose you want to access the site.css, then how you will access the site.css with ASP.NET Core means you need to provide the path, port number on which your application is executing, and here js site.js. If you want to access this site.css, then you have to put this css site.css. You can only access the static files like this if you put the static files inside the webroot folder. If you are not putting the static files inside this webroot folder, then you cannot access them through the browser. And more importantly, guys, more importantly, in order to access the static files, right, what you need to do, you need to use a middleware component. What middleware component you need to use? You need to use static files middleware component. So how to use this static files middleware component? That we will discuss. That we will discuss in practically, right? But before understanding this use static files middleware component, we need to understand one class called web application option. So why I am going to discuss this web application option class is mean. See, by default, this www folder is going to be your webroot folder. But I don't want that naming convention. I want to provide a unique name to my webroot folder. My webroot folder, some webroot folder, any meaningful name. But if you give any meaningful name, then by default it is not going to be served like this. This default implementation means what? Now your content should and must be present inside this webroot folder. And if you want to give a different name for your webroot folder, then what you need to do, you need to make use of this web application option class. Using this web application option class, it provides some properties like environment name, application name, web root path, content root path, right? You can set the name and then you need to pass this web application option instance as a parameter to your web builder method. How that practically I will show you. But now, if you go to the definition of this web application class, then you will see these things, right? So let me go to the program class, right? So let me go to the program class. What I'm doing, I'm creating one instance of a web application, right? So currently what I'm doing, I'm just going to the definition of this class. So if you go to the definition of this class, then this is one argument, args. this is nothing but your arguments, a command line argument. Any value you want to pass from command line, that you can set using this web application instance. Environment, whether the application is running in a production environment or the application is running in a staging environment, that you can get as well as set using this property. Then another one is application name. What is the application name? So by default, whatever the project name, this is nothing but your application name. Content root path means what? What is the path where your all the content are present? So for example, this is nothing but my content root path. So if you want to know where exactly all your application content are created, this is nothing but your content root path. And here you can see www by default it is available, but it is not showing here, right? So we have added this folder, right? So you can say this is nothing but your content root path, and this is nothing but your web root path. So if someone asks you what is the difference between a web root path and a content root path in a ASP.NET Core application, this is one of the interview question. Then you need to tell that content root path is nothing but where all our application content are going to be present. And the WebRoot is a part of our content root path. And what about WebRoot path? Now, inside WebRoot path, we can put the static files which can be served directly from the browser, right? And to serve the static files, what we need? We need to use one middleware component that is called static files middleware component. So this is the difference. Content root path means it will give you the path of your content, right? It doesn't means whether it is the CS file, CS pros file, JSON file, whatever content is present, that path it is going to give you. That is the project root directory path. And this is nothing but where you can put all your static files. This is the difference, right? So now if you come here, then you will see that, right? So you will see that, go to definition, you will see that this is for the command line argument, this is for the environment, this is for the application name, this is for the content root path, and this is nothing but web root path, which is nothing but your www root folder. Right, so this is the option class, and these are the properties. The content root path is the absolute path to the directory that contains the application content. The web root path is the absolute path to the directory that contains the web servable application content file, right? Application static content file, better use it. So within the content root path, all your content is present, and within your web root path, only the content which can be served by the application, right, via the URL, those are going to be present. Now let us modify the main method and see what is the default settings for this, right? So default setting means what exactly the default name, right? So you can say what trying to print. Now whenever I run the application, I want to print the name of the environment. I want to print the application name. I want to print the what is the path of your webroot, right? And what is the path of your content root. Currently, I'm not passing any command line arguments, so I'm not accessing those. But if you want, then also you can access them, right? We have already discussed. But in a real-time application, we're never going to pass any value from the command line, right? So now if you run the application, then it will show you what is the content root path, right? What is the web root path and all these things, right? Okay, let me increase the size. See, what is the environment? Environment is by default development. What is the application name? It is showing the application name as fast core web application. What is the web root path? Web root path is nothing but your www root folder. And what is the content root path? This is nothing but the path where all your content is present. So this is one of the important class. And this class, right, you can access that class properties using the environment, right? If you go to this environment property, then you will see that this is environment, right? So web application, and we are accessing this all these properties because of this web application option class. How to use this web application class, how we can set the custom web path, root path, all these things that we will discuss. But for now, if someone asks you how you can get the application name, content root path name, right? Then you need to tell that I need to use the web application builder instance, and then using the environment property, I can access the environment name, application name, web root path, and content root path. Clear, guys?
Yes,
Clear?
yes.
Right. So can we rename, right? That is fine. Is this going to be used? Do we need to access this thing in our real-time application? No, this is not required. Then why I'm going to tell this thing environment name, application name, web root path, content root path? Because if you want to do some kind of customization in the sense, I want to change the environment name from development to production. I want to change the Webroot to folder name, right? So let's see how you can do this. Can we rename the www.root folder in ASP.NET Core? Yes, you can rename the www.root folder of the folder to any other name as per your choice, right? So then what you need to do, then if you rename the Webroot folder, right, then you need to set that what is your, what I can say, what is your new name for your Webroot folder by using the create builder method, right, which takes the web application instance. So basically what exactly it means if you look at this create builder method, currently it is taking the arguments object, and by default it is thinking or by default it is setting that the web www is the what I can say, www root is the web root path for your application. But if you want to rename, right, for example, let me rename this. So instead of a www root, what I'm doing here, I'm renaming this. I'm renaming this to my web root. So as soon as I rename this my web root, if you look at the folder symbol, it changed from web. It is like a folder. But now it will not consider this is your web root path automatically. It will not consider this is your web root path automatically. What you need to do, you need to tell this thing explicitly to the framework. Then how you are going to tell that please use my web root path as the root path. Now for that purpose, we need to use the other overloaded version of the create builder method, which takes web application instance as an web application option as a parameter. Now if you go to the definition, right, then you will see that there is a create builder method which doesn't take any parameter. Currently, we are using the web builder method, which is taking the string arguments, means command line argument as the parameter. But apart from this, we are having another web application option, right? We are having another overloaded version of this create builder method, which is taking the web application option instance as a parameter, right? So what you need to do, you need to create an instance of this web application class, right? Right? Then what you need to do? You need to set the properties. So as I already discussed, all these properties are available: environment, application, web root path, content root path. All these options are available. So I want to use my web root path as the directory. So what you need to do? You need to put this thing and you need to provide what is your folder name, right? My web root path. Now, I want to use the environment. I want to modify the environment from what I can say development to production. So basically, what it means, basically, I just want to make sure that the environment is in production, right? Whenever you are putting your code in production, you need to mention this thing that the environment is production, right? Then
Sir,
what?
one doubt.
Yes.
Actually, we are setting environment in also app, properties also, like launch settings
Hey,
also.
in the
So
launch
here,
setting and the properties, do you think that those are available in your production server? In production server, do you have this Visual Studio and all these things?
no, no.
Then how you will set
Yeah.
these things? Understand?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Got it.
But
So
app
what you need to
settings person will be there, right?
this is app setting is there, but you should not do those things. Why? Because if someone want, they can, because these files are available, anybody can change. Right? If somebody change from app settings to what I can say, so you need to think from the security point of view, right? If someone change, that is fine. See, app setting is fine, but I'm showing different options. You can put that inside the app setting file also. But this option is also available, right? So what you need
Yes.
to do then what you need to do, you need to pass this web application instance as the what I can say as a parameter to this create builder method. As I already discussed, there are a different version. One doesn't take any parameter. One create builder method take the web application instance. So currently, I'm creating the web application instance and passing that. So now with these changes, if you run the application, then you will see that it is going to show me the product environment as what production. It is going to show me the webroot path. It's nothing but this path. On the webroot path directory is nothing but your my webroot path. So now let me run the application. See, it is showing production and it is current now. It is showing me the webroot path as my webroot path. So basically, if you want, right, then you can also create your own folder which is going to be act as the webroot. How you can do this? Just rename the folder, create an instance of a web application class, use the property webroot path, set the value whatever the folder name, then pass this instance as a parameter to your create builder method. Clear, guys?
So if you don't mind, can you explain about the variable? So
Sorry, this var.
so variable, yeah. So this is we are using in the testings, right? But I
No,
don't
no, no,
know.
no, 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 no. So you are having some experience into C sharp or not?
C sharp, yeah, I have. But the variable we are using in the unit test cases more.
No, no, no,
So
it's not
that's what
the
I.
unique traces. See, there are two types of a data type, right? If you see, instead of her, I can also use dynamic. Right here also I can use dynamic data type, right? So what is the difference means? Like in this case, if I'm using dynamic, I'm not going to get any kind of intelligence. If I'm getting var, then I'm getting all the intelligence. Why? Now, because whenever I'm using var, then based on the right hand side data, it will decide the data type, right? For example, if I'm writing var norm equals to 10, right? And if I'm writing integer norm2 equal to 10, there is no difference between them. There's no difference between them, right? So if you move your mouse pointer over this num2 variable, then it is saying that data type is integer, right? And if I am moving my mouse pointer over the num, then it is also saying the data type as integer. So what it means based on the right hand side data, if you are using var, the data type will automatically decide it, right? So in this case, as you know, this method is going to return me an instance of a web application builder, right? So here, this var, if I move my mouse pointer over builder, then it is showing me the data type is web application builder. So here it doesn't matter if you use var or if you use web application builder, it doesn't make any sense, right? Means both are
Is
going to
there
be same.
any syntax for that, sir?
No, there's no syntax. Instead of using web application builder, if you write var, there is no differences because var means based on the right hand side, it will decide the data type. And here you are directly using the appropriate data type. There's no difference. There is no performance penalty. Nothing is there. Both are going to work in same manner. But there is a difference between dynamic and var. And you have to learn that. Then you just Google it. You will get lots of information from internet. What is the difference between var, dynamic, how they are going to be work, all these things. But for now, you just need to remember var if you are using, then based on the right hand side value, it will decide the data type. So in this case, what is the right hand side value? 10. So it will decide the data type as integer. So what I'm writing 10.5f. So it is, so currently, which type of a data type it is going to be a float. Why? Because the data is going to be what? The data is going to be a float. Now I'm storing some string value, right? So in this case, some string value. So what type of value in the right hand side? String value. So data type is going to be string only, right? Clear?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Sir, solution in Solution Explorer, my web www root folder is not changed.
Yes, that is what we have already changed now. By default, www.root is going to be web. But here we are forcefully making the application to treat this my WebRoot folder as web. So you will not find that web symbol here, but it will behave like your WebRoot folder.
We have to explicitly change here.
Yeah, here we have explicitly changed. Now we are explicitly specifying my WebRoot is going to be the root folder. Right, and by default it will not create, because my WebRoot folder you can create any number of folder. Then how Visual Studio will know that this is your WebRoot folder? If you are creating any folder with the name www.root, then that will become the WebRoot folder. But like my WebRoot, I can create your WebRoot, their WebRoot, some WebRoot, or WebRoot, any kind of name you can give. Then how will Visual Studio think that this is your WebRoot folder? The default is www.root you can give. If you want to modify anything and you want to treat that this folder should be behave like my WebRoot folder, then for that purpose you need to use this web application option class. You need to create an instance, specify what is your WebRoot folder, pass that instance to the create builder method. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah, while renaming the root folder to my web root folder, is it compulsory to set the environment as a production?
No. See, I'm saying using this web application class, right? You are having multiple properties. Right? I'm just
Right.
showing you how you can use those properties. It is not necessary. It is not mandatory. I'm changing this one. I'm removing this one. It's going to work exactly. But in this case, it is going to show me the default environment which is set, right? Which is nothing but in this case, production, right? Why I'm getting this error? The project www why? Now run the application. Why I'm getting an unhandled exception? D project first core web application, first core web application root. Why I'm getting this error? I should not get this error. Am I doing any
Already
changes?
name
Hmm?
already changed.
Sorry? Yeah, name is already changed. That's fine.
Environment is deleted now.
No, environment is not an issue. Let me do one thing. Sometimes the caching problem is there. Let me clean the solution and try to rebuild the solution. Yeah, now you can see we are getting the output as expected.
Okay.
Clear, guys?
Mm. So there is no use of defining the environment as a production or a
See,
development.
it's up to you only. If you want, you can define. If you do not want, no need. Nothing is mandatory. Na? Even though without using anything, you can also create. If you want to create a web builder, you can also create like this. There is another overloaded version which doesn't take any parameter. Right? It is completely up to you.
Okay.
Right? So now we will see how we can create some static files, right? And how we can access those static files from the WebRoot folder. So basically, if you guys want, then you can create like this. But I would suggest to go with the default implementation. Default implementation means you should go with the www.root, because it will make your folder looks like the folder which can be accessed from the application, right? So I generally prefer to go with the default naming convention which is provided by Visual Studio. So, but it is not up to you. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create some static files, and I want those static files to be accessed from your application, right? So, for that purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to store this. All right. So, okay. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this image and paste it inside this WebRoot folder. So the copy paste option is not available. So what I'm going to do, I'm just making.
Pranay, one question I have.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
www root folder is for static files, right? If I put any
Yes.
dynamic file by fault or
Dynamic
anything,
file you can dynamic file you need to create using that controller action method, something like this.
Yeah, like let us suppose I put some ASPX space, something like that. Not ASPX, some executable file. Whether it will be executed or it won't, it will show the
No,
actual
it's
content.
only static file where it's no dynamic data. Those things you can
Okay.
only put here, right?
It
Nothing
won't be
else.
okay. Thanks.
So let me store this image where I need to store ASP.NET Core training, right? Here I'm creating this as my image.jpg, right? So then what I'm doing, I'm going to this folder, my image, copy this one. Why this paste option is not showing here? Okay. Right. So my image is loaded here. Now what my intention is, I want to access this image. This is a static file, right? From the browser. Then how you can do this? Right. Let me comment all these things. And let it be there, right? So what I'm doing, I'm running the application. By default, it is showing. Now, if you want to access the my image, then what you need to do, my image dot what format we have created, JPG, na? JPG. See, I'm not getting the output. Why? Because in order to sort the static files, what we need to do, we need to use a middleware component, right? What component? Uh, the extension is JPG or PNG, guys? JPG, fine. Right? So what we need to do, we need to use one middleware component called use static files middleware component. So until and unless we are not using that middleware component, we cannot access the static files, right? So let me put that middleware component, right? I'm putting that middleware component here, right? So you can see use static files middleware component. Once I put this use static files middleware component, now you can access, now you can solve the static files, right? So file image.jpg. See, you can see that image is loading on my screen, right? Even though if you want, you can also put some HTML files, right? Suppose I'm creating a subfolder, right? So I'm giving that folder name as HTMLs. What is the how I can create this?
Sir, I think you need to stop debugging.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So some HTMLs, right? So I'm creating one HTMLs. Inside this HTML, I'm going to add a HTML file. Add new item, right? And here I'm searching for HTML page, and here I'm giving this as index, right? I'm putting this as okay, my HTML, my HTML page, right? And here I'm just putting some text, right? H1, welcome to ASP.NET Core, right? So now run this one, save this one, right? Now run the application. And now go to what is the folder name? HTML. And inside this folder, what is the file name? My HTML page.html. You can see. So now you are able to access the static files, right? Now, if you don't want to use this www and you want to use your own, Webroot folder, then what you need to do, suppose I am going to change this my web root, my Webroot, right? Then what you need to do to this web application builder instance, you need to pass, right? What you need to set, sorry. Here you need to create web application option class instance, right? And here you need to set the WebRootPath and you need to provide the name, right? What is the name? My web root. My web root, right? See, so before doing this, let me do one thing, right? Currently, I'm not passing this instance to this create builder method, right? Let me comment this one. Right now, let us try to access this my image and this my HTML file. Right, let me run this one. See, he is saying that webroot folder is not available. Right, on compilation error, it is throwing me. Let me clean this one. Right, let me run this one. Right, you are getting the output, right? So what I'm doing, I'm just going and trying to access the my HTML page. See, I'm not able to access this. Why? Because he is not finding any webroot folder which can serve the static files. Now let me do these changes. Uncomment this, pass this option object as a parameter to this create builder method, clean the solution. Sometimes some caching issue might occur, right? Just clean the solution and then run the project, right? So once you run the project now, go to my image.html. See, I'm able to access. Next, you go to HTML, right? This, so you can see I'm also able to access this. So basically, you have both the option. If you want, by default, www.root is going to be the root folder. From there, you can serve the static files, but for serving the static files, what you need to do, you need to use this use static files middleware component. Now if you go to the definition, then you will see that it is completely saying enable static file serving for the current request path. So whatever the request path, whatever the path you are providing in the URL, to serve those paths directly into your application, directly in the browser, you have to use this app static files middleware component. Other options are there, right? You can say request path static files option, right? Other parameters are there. That what we are going to discuss one by one, right? But for now, uh, you guys understand how to create the webroot path. Can I rename the webroot path? How I can search static files from the webroot path, right? How I can configure my custom webroot folder, right? My custom folder as the webroot folder. How I can use this webroot path properties? What are the different properties available inside this option class, like environment name? What exactly this environment name is going to return? What exactly this application name is going to be return? What is the difference between webroot path and this content root path? Guys, clear?
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yes.
Can we have multiple root folder, custom root folder?
No, 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 no. See, multiple. See, if you have multiple root folder, then how Visual Studio will identify from which folder I need to access? If you are having this my web root folder, here I'm putting my image.jpg. I can create my web root to two folder. Inside that root to two folder, I can also put my image.jpg. Then in that case, how Visual Studio will identify who is going to be the root folder and how he is going to serve the request?
Okay, that means we have only one root folder, right?
Only one
Either
root
custom
folder.
or whatever.
Yes, yes. Only one root folder
Okay,
per
okay.
application.
Okay,
Clear,
sir.
guys? Right? That's clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right. So now, as you know, right? So what is my next requirement is, see, currently if I run the application, right? Currently if I run the application, then what will happen? By default, this middleware component is executed and this content, right? What we configured here, this is going to be displayed. But my requirement is, say, if you see, whenever we visit any website, the default homepage is going to be displayed, right? That home.cshtml or what you can say index.cshtml or default.html. So this default page is going to be displayed by default whenever we do not provide anything in the URL. So my next requirement is how I can set the default page for my application. For example, right, within this application, so let me create one folder, one HTML file, add new item, right? So what I'm searching for, HTML file, right? So basically what I want this index.html file to be the default file for my application. That means what? It means, so this is my index.html file. I have put some statement here, index page, right? So what my requirement is, whenever the application run, then this default.index HTML file should be displayed in the browser instead of executing this static middleware component. So what exactly it means? It means I want this index.html as the default page for my application. So if that is a requirement, then how you can do this, right? So for that purpose, what you need to do is you need to use, right? Definitely you are going to do the same thing, right? Use static files middleware component. But what you need to do, you need to use static files, right? So let me do these changes, right? So with these changes, what will happen? Now you can see index.html page is there. I'm using is you see this is a static file. In order to serve the static file, definitely you need to use this use static files middleware component. Until and unless you are not using this use static files middleware component, let me rename this as a www.root folder. So you can use this Webroot, or even though you can also make this as a my Webroot custom. For that, you need to use that web application instance, set this and pass that instance to the this create builder method. But I don't want. I want to go with this default naming convention. Now, whenever I run the application, then by default, this request processing content, what is written there, that is going to be executed. So instead of this, what I want this index.cshtml page, index.html page to be displayed on the browser. So for that purpose, what I need to do, right? What I need to do, I need to go to this index.html page, index.html. So once I click index.html, this index page is going to be displayed. Now, I don't want to provide this index.html, but whenever the application load, right, then by default that index.html page should be displayed. That means I want to make this as the default page for our application. So for that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use another middleware component before the what I can say, use static middleware component. Before use static middleware component, you need to use default files middleware component. So what exactly this use default file middleware component will do is it will set the default file which is going to be served whenever you do not provide anything into the URL, right? And by default, right? And by default, what exactly it will do? It will make use of right, enables the default file mapping on the correct path, right? So with this file in present, now if you run the application, then you will see that this index.html file is going to be displayed when the application load. Clear? So when the application load, then how it is identifying that this is the index.page which I need to display when the application run for the first time means what? Now by default, use default files, it will look, right? This use default file, right? So this is the middleware component. This use default files middleware component will look your webroot folder, try to figure out these 4 files inside this folder. Is there any file with the name index.html, index.html, default.html, default.html available inside this webroot folder? Yes, there is a file called index.html available inside this webroot folder. If that file is available, the order is the priority also in the same order. If that file is available, then it will make that file as the default file for your application. Clear, guys?
If my file is outside the folder, outside the
So,
www folder,
see, as I already told you, static files only going to be shown from this webroot folder. If this file is not present inside this www.root folder, then it will not serve. Any stand, see, from the beginning only I'm saying only the files which are present inside this www.root folder you can access from your browser. If that file is not present inside this www.root folder, then you cannot access it. It's going to be blocked. Clear?
Default files means we need to use only static files, not any dynamic files.
No, you even the if you see, for example, if I'm creating a folder, right? Let me create a folder. See, this is my folder, right? This is my folder, and inside this my folder, I just move the what I can say index.html. Right? Currently, which folder index.html file is there? Inside the my folder, not the webroot folder. Now try to run the application and see what happens. Who is going to where the response is generated? That index page.html page is executed or the component which you registered is executed. So only the files which are present inside the webroot folder going to be served as the static files. Now move this inside the webroot folder. Right? Now run the application once more. Before running, let me clear the cache. Right? Clear the cache. Right? Run the application and see that index page is going to be served. So the point that you need to remember, only the files which are present inside the www folder is going to be served. Clear, guys? Now,
I
now
see.
what is
So,
yes?
so what happened if you not followed that order of middleware? If you use the default after the static files, what happened?
See, if you not follow, see by default, if you not follow this one, right? So in this case, it will not going to work. Why? Because it will first set the static files, then only the static file is going to be served. It will first set the default files, then it is going to work. If you are not setting the default file, then directly whenever the request comes to here, it is only going to serve now. So in this case, it will not work. Right? So request file and the response is generated. So it will not work. So order is important. First of all, it will set the default file, and whatever the default file is set, then that is going to be served by this use static files middleware. But if you put that outside the after this use static files means what? Whenever the request come, it will check whether the request is for the static files or not. No, it is not for the static files. Let me run the next component, right? And in this case, what will happen? First, it will set the default file. Right, the default file is set. Then when the request comes, then it will check whether the request is for the default file. Do the user provided any URL in the browser? No, it is not provided. Is any default file set for the application? Yes, some default file is set. Let me figure out whether that default file available in the webroot folder or not. Yes, it is available. Let me execute that and return the response. Clear?
Yes, yes.
Right. So now what is my next requirement is I want to create a different file, right? My custom page 1.html, and I want that custom file to be the default file, right? By default, we understand. By default, the framework will look for this file name index.html, index.html, right? Default.html. But instead of putting this default file, I want to create a custom file, and I want to custom HTML file, and I want to use that custom HTML file as the default file for our application. For example, let me add this one, right? Add new item. Where is the add new item option? HTML. I'm giving this as my custom HTML. So here I'm putting this as custom HTML page. Give me 1 minute, guys.
Sir, your voice is not.
So your voice is not audible.
Yeah. I just went for 1 minute. I told now. So this is my custom HTML page, right? So once you set once you have this custom HTML page, now what is my requirement? I can access this custom HTML page directly using my custom HTML page, something like my custom, what is the name? My custom page one, right? My custom page one.html. I can access like this, but what I want, right? If I move this one, right? If I move this one, then it is going to display the index page, right? Instead of showing this index page, what my requirement, I want to display this custom page as the default page. So for that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use, right? You need to override the use default files, right? Override the default files means what? You need to create a default file options instance, right? So default file options instance, you need to first clear if there is any default file name. Then you need to set the default file name by using the default file name property. And then you need to pass that default file option as a parameter to use default files. Right? So this is basically a three-step process. First of all, you need to see. So guys, see, whenever you want to do some kind of a customization, right? For that customization, if you say use default files, then there is a custom for customization. You need to use the default files option, right? For example, earlier we are using web application, right? Web application, and here you can see I'm passing the argument. And if I want to do some customization, then what class I need to use? Web application option class, right? Web application options class, right? This is web application, and I need to use web application options class. Similarly, this is default files, right? So default files means I want to override the default file. So for that purpose, I need to use default files options class. So I need to create an instance, right? Once you create the instance, first you need to clear if anything, any default name is already there. So for that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use the default file names object and you need to call the clear method. And once you clear, then you need to add a new default file, right? Whatever the file name you want, whatever the file you want to be the default file for your application, using this add method, you need to set the file my, and what is the name? My custom page one.html I'm setting here. And once you create the instance, then what you need to do, you just need to pass this default file option, right, as a parameter to this use default files, right? So if you go to the definition, then you will see that this class, this extension method, taking one parameter of a default option. There should be another, right, another class, right, which is taking string request path, right? Another default file which doesn't take any parameter. Earlier, we have used the version which doesn't take any parameter. Now we are using the overloaded version which takes one parameter, and here using that parameter I'm setting the default file name. Using the string relative path, you can also specify that. What I'm giving you a task, right? I'm showing you two options means without using the parameter, right? I'm using this default options class, and next one what I'm giving you as a task to you guys, please try to set the default file using the other overloaded version which takes the string path as a parameter. This is the task, right? Here you need to provide the relative path. So where exactly your page is present, that path you need to provide as a string value, right? So this is a task for you guys to do, and if you are unable to do, then let me know. And if you guys do, then please share the same in the .NET Core discussion group. So once you set the default path, then the rest of the things is going to be same, right? So same in the sense that you need to use that default files, right? You need to use, use static files, right? So once you set the default files, then you need to use this use static files, and that's it. Now if you run the application, then you will see that custom HTML page is going to be your default page. So by default, it will look for the index.html or default.html or HTML. But if you want, then also you can create any custom page as your default page. For that purpose, you need to use default file options class, create an instance, set the default page, then pass that instance as a parameter to this use default files method. And definitely this static file should be there, because until and unless we are not putting the static files, it is not going to serve the static files from this webroot to folder. Clear, guys? Clear?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
Okay.
So
Fine.
most of the time we are using static files also.
Static files means if suppose you are developing some kind of static application, then in that case you need to use this one. But once you develop the dynamic web application, then in that case this is not required, right? Right. What is the use of a huge file server middleware component in ASP.NET Core, right? So basically, if you see currently, right, currently what I'm using huge static files middleware component. I'm using huge default files middleware component, right? So instead of using two different middleware component, right, one component is for setting the default files, one component is for serving the static files. So can we combine these two things into a single middleware component? Yes, we can combine. And for that purpose, what we need to use? We need to use file server middleware component. See, first of all, I need to create an instance of a file server option class. Clear any default file name is there. Use the default file name whichever you want to use, and then pass this file server option instance as a parameter to your use file server class. And this file server class combine the functionality of use default files, use static files middleware component, use directory browsing. What is directory browsing? That I will discuss after some time. So all these things are going to be combined by this use file server middleware component. So you have two options. You can use default files middleware component plus static files. You can combine this together into a single middleware component that is called use file server. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to do customization, then what you need to do? File server, then you need to add these options, right? And you need to create the option object. First of all, clear any default file name is if there. Add the custom default file name whichever you want. Pass this instance as a parameter to this class, and that's it. Once you have done this, now you do not need to use that static files middleware component. Why? Because this is combining all the functionality. If you go to the file server middleware component, then you can see enable all static middleware with the given options, right? So it will enable all the static middleware component, right? So now if you run the application, then you will see it is serving the data from the static page. Clear, guys? Clear or not?
Yes.
Right. So
Sir, I
now,
have one question. Instead of explaining like this, explaining, and also you can create one web page, so it's more helpful
sorry,
to us.
sorry,
So
sorry.
I think you can explaining, and also you can create one web page.
So this is web page only, na? This is nothing but this is your web page only.
I mean, so it's showing only name, right? So background and all the stuff. So
See, I'm not here to design your HTML pages using CSS, Bootstrap, right? This is not supposed to be done here. Whenever time come, I will create the form, I will create a text box, a drop-down list, HTML box, everything I'm going to create step by step, right? But currently, if I'm going to explain you what is HTML helper, what is HTML tag helper, you will not understand. Right? Currently, this session is not meant for what is there inside this web page. This session is meant for how you can make your web page as the how you can make a web page as the default page, right? Right. So once the time will come, definitely I'm going to add all these things, right? Even though I'm going to do all the operation against the database, I'm not going to do any kind of static things. Database will come into the picture. Webform will come into the picture, right? So where you can up the data, right? You can ask the user to enter the details. There is a button. Once you click the button, we'll validate the data, we'll store the data into the database, right? All these things is going to be there. There is some form we'll create where you can perform for edit operation, insert operation, index space, right? Where you can see all the information, delete option, right? Create option, everything we are going to discuss one by one. But now I'm not going to focus on those things. I'm just keep focusing on how you can make a web page as the how you can make HTML file as your default page. That is what my intention. What is there inside the HTML page? It is up to you. Whatever code you want to write inside this HTML page, that you can write. No one can stop. But it should be a static content should be there. There should not be any dynamic content. You want to design your web page as per your requirement, you can design. No one can stop you. That is going to be displayed in your browser. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. So guys, apart from this, there is another middleware component, that is use directory browser. So currently we have discussed a few middleware. One is use file server, one is use static files, one is use default files, right? So apart from this, there is another middleware component called directory browsing. And what exactly this directory browsing middleware component will do is it will list you what are the content present inside your Webroot folder, right? Basically, we're never going to use this directory browser in your real-time applications, right? So, but what I can tell you, if you use this use directory browser middleware component, right? Then what it will give you now, whatever the content present inside your Webroot folder, that information it is going to give you in the UI, right? See, there is HTML folder is there, right? Index.html page is there, my custom page is there, right? My image name is there, right? What is the size of this folder, right? What is the size of this file? When this file is last modified, all information is there, right? Now, if you click on this, then this page will be displayed, right? If you click on this, display is going to be load, right? If you click on this, then this is going to be load. So this directory browsing option is also available in your .NET application. Clear?
Yes.
So this is nothing but how you can use directory browse. The last thing what we are going to discuss today is developer exception page middleware component. So I'm trying to explain you middleware component because we have just started the middleware component, discussed what is middleware component, how you can register middleware component, how to create a custom middleware component, what is the application processing pipeline of the middleware component, how we can use few middleware components. That is what we are discussing. And if you guys remember, we have discussed another middleware component, that is exception handling developer exception page middleware component. And guys, remember, whenever you are developing any kind of real-time application, exception handling is one of the key feature. Exception handling will give you a new life to your application. If you are not properly handling the exception, right, then the user of your application may find it very difficult to use your product. So you should be very much serious, very much sensitive while handling the exception. What things needs to display whenever a particular type of exception is occurring, right? Instead of if you are working with our old .NET framework, there is a yellow screen of a depth, right? That comes whenever there is any unhandled exception in your web application. You should not display those things, right? And showing those information on a live project is make very easy. It will make the hacker's life very easy to hack your application. So you should properly handle the exception. Again, suppose in the development environment, whenever you are running your application, guys, give me 1 minute. Okay. So basically, if you are developing, right, while you are developing the application, you need to display the exception details in the web page. But while you are deploying the project into your production environment, you should not display such exception details into the web page, right? So now let us try to understand what is a developer exception page middleware component, how exactly it works, right? At what scenario we need to use this one, at what scenario we need to we should not use this one, right? Let us try to understand these things, right? So first of all, let me copy this code and then I will explain you directly. Right? So you can see currently what I'm doing, I'm creating, this is the simple logic, right? And within this mapget method, I have written some logic. And I have written the logic in such a manner, at runtime it is going to throw me some exception, right? So can anybody tell me which kind of exception it will throw at runtime?
Divide by
Division by 0. Yeah,
Yeah.
divide by 0.
Divided by 0 exception. So whenever this statement is going to be executed at that time, it is going to throw me divide by 0 exception. But now in this example, I have not used the developer exception page middleware component. But now let me try to run the application and see whether I'm getting the exception details or not. Yes, I'm getting the exception details. So how is that possible? Instead of showing, if I'm showing this exception details into the real-time live project, then it will make whole for our project, right? Hacker can hack our application, and the user of our application, he will get confused. What is exactly this? What is this 80? What is this number one, number two? What exactly this naming, right? So user of our application will get confused. So we should not display this thing. But as we are developing the application, so as we are in the development environment, right? Then what exactly happening? Now, as we are in the development environment, Visual Studio, no, the environment is development. So by default, it include the developer exception middleware component from .NET 5, right? If you are working with the earlier versions, then by default, the developer exception page middleware component is not included. But that is included from .NET 5, .NET 6, .NET 7. By default, the developer exception page middleware component is included. Sir, how I can include manually, right? If you want to include this manually, then what you need to do? App.environment is development, and then you need to use developer exception page middleware component. See what exactly it means? It means if the environment is development, then please show the exception details to the user. If the environment is not development, then don't show the exception details to the what I can say user. So currently the environment is development. So as the currently the environment is development, so it is going to show you the details of the exception. Right now, let's try to change the environment. Right, how we can change the environment? Go to the properties folder, debug, launch profile. Instead of a production, make development, make it as a production, right? So once you make this as a production, now our environment is changed from development to production. So as the environment is changed to production, now you will see that now you will not see that error. Instead, what it is saying 500. So can anybody tell me what is this status code 500 means? What this 500 represent in .NET? It is not related to .NET, it is a standard.
Internal server error.
Internal
Exactly.
server.
Internal server error.
Internal server error. But instead, and here it is showing there is some internal server, right? That is happening in your application, right? So instead of showing this, it is always good and better to display a generic error page, right? That is what we want to start discussing the efficient web API. We'll see how we can set this generic error page, right? Exception handling, global error handling, providing some generic page, right? All these things we are going to discuss in detail. But now I'm just keep focusing on this user developer exception page middleware component. So why I'm not getting the exception details now? Because we are into the production environment. So in the production environment, it doesn't make any sense to show the exception details. But if you are in the development environment, you need to show the exception details, right? Now if you want to so the exception details, then what you need to do, you just need to go and change the environment to development, right? So go and change the development, right? So with these changes in place, now run the application and you should see the exception details. Plus, and guys, here you can see there is a plus button. And once you click on this plus button, then by default, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Before this exception causing statement, 6 statements are there. After the exception causing statement, also it is displaying the next 6 statements. How is that possible? That is possible because the default setting is there. Can we change that setting? Yes, we can change. But before that, let me explain you what exactly the stack. Stack means it is going to give you the stack trace, right? So if you remember, there is a stack trace property in a exception class. That track trace will give you exactly at what file the error is causing, at what line number the error is causing, and what class the error is going to be error is causing, right? So you can say this is my application name, this is the class name, and this is the line number which causes the exception. So all these things you will get. So this is core means currently there is no data. For example, whenever you are developing one application, right, and in that application, you know, after the URL you can put a question mark, then you can pass the data in the form of a key value pair. This is nothing but your core string, right? Do you have any core string in this case? No, there is no core string. Is there any cookie currently used by your application? No cookies are being used. Any header? Header means what now? What is the request data? So whenever we are sending the request, right? What are the information we are sending to the user? Any request header, request method, right? Any form data, post data, any request data, those you will find inside this request header. And routing means what is the method, so whether it is the get method or post method, right? So all information you will display here, it will be display here. So as we progress, right, once we start developing, then we will discuss this thing, how you can use core string, how you can use cookies, headers, routing, right? All this thing in detail, but for now you just need to keep focus on this type. So what is the error? Yes, divide by 0 exception. At what files this error is causing? It is causing the error in program.cs class file. At what line number the error is causing? The line number is causing in the line number 19, right? What are the statement before the error? These are the 6 statements which are present before the error causing, and these are the 6 statements which is present after the error causing statement. So from this, you can identify what exactly the error, at what file, at what line number, and accordingly you will take the necessary actions. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. So before proceeding further, how we can modify this, right? I just want to tell you one important thing that tricky means how you can customize the developer exception middleware, right? Currently, it is showing six statements instead of showing 6. I only want to see show 3 statements before the exception causing, and after the exception causing, I want to show 3 statements. For that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use you need to customize the developer exception page middleware component. So before that, what I need to tell you is, see, if you want to customize developer exception page middleware component, then what class file you need to, what class file instance you need to create? You need to create a developer exception page options object. See, developer exception page options. If you want to override the default files, then what class instance you need to create? You need to create a default files options object, right? Suppose you want to override the static files middleware component, then what class instance you need to create? You need to create a static files options object, right? Similarly, if you want to override the file server, then you need to use file server options object. So the point that you need to remember, whatever the middleware you are going to use, plus options are always available. For use developer exception page options available. For use default files middleware component, default files option is available. For use static files middleware component, if you want to override this middleware component, then for that purpose, static files option object is available. So for overriding the use file server middleware component, you need to use file server options middleware component. So basically, from this middleware component, you can easily identify what class instance needs to be created to customize this, right? For example, now you guys tell me. So what is the middleware component name is developer exception page middleware component. If I want to override this middleware component, right? Then what if I want to customize this developer exception middleware component, then what class instance I need to create, guys? You need to copy this
Developer
name.
exception page options.
loss
With
options, right?
options.
So you have to put here OPTIOL options, right? So you can say developer exception middleware component, right? Now if you go to this class file, then you will see there is a property called source code limit. This source code line count is by default set to 6, and this property is nothing but showing 6 statements, 1 statement, right? 2 statements, 3 statement, 4 statement, 5 statement, right? And this is nothing but your 6 statement. So using this source code count limit property, we can set the default page, right? So you can see while creating the instance, you can also set, or after creating the instance, you can also set. Now I want to show 3 lines of a statement, right? Before the exception causing statement and after the exception causing statement, like the way other middleware component we override. So in the same way, what you need to do, you need to pass now this option object as a parameter to this middleware component, right? So there is to this middleware component, you need to pass this option object. So with these changes, now what will happen if you run the application, then you will see that the exception causing statement, right, only going to show you 3 statements. Here 3 statements and here 3 statements. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Any question from
Yes, sir.
anyone? How you can customize?
I have one question.
Here, ask.
We are using options for changing anything, whatever the name is and the option. But for changing the file name, like wwwroot, we have changed it. So why don't we use the use static option? The
See, this is not a middleware
static
component.
option for that.
See, using app, you can only call the middleware component. This is not a middleware component. If you go to this page option
Okay.
class, right? If you go to the definition, it's a class. So you cannot call that class instance using the app, right? Web application instance, right? But if you go to this use developer exception page, then you will see that it is an extension method and the first parameter is application builder. So whenever any method which is taking the first parameter as application builder, then you can only call that method using the app instance or web application instance, right? So in this case, this um, developer exception page, right? It is not taking any parameter application builder, which you so you cannot call that method, right? And there is no such method available. Which see in this case, I'm just calling one method. This developer exception page, it is a method. And in this case, developer exception page options, it is not a method. What is this? This is a class. And using this instance, how I can call a class? See, for calling, see, whenever we are accessing, so this is one object. Object means using this object, we can access some properties, some method, right? Something like this we can access. But how I can access this class? Is there any possibility using one object I can access a class?
No, my question is that like we are using here development exception options for
Yeah. So
setting the
you just
changes.
tell me. You
And
just tell me. In
no,
this case,
that
in
is,
this particular
I
example,
agree. We cannot do that.
no, that is
But
not mine. Let me first complete my question, then I will give
Mhm.
you enough time, right? So what I want is, you want to, whatever changes you want, tell me I will do in this example. What
Okay,
exactly you
with
want?
the
Yes.
use of app dot use static option we have used, right? App dot use static files.
So in this particular example, I am modifying this developer exception page using this one. Now just tell me, without using this developer exception page, how I can use this developer exception page options to customize?
No, I don't want, I'm agree that we are using development exception phase. So I want that if I want to change something in app.use static files, can I use static file options also for that?
See, okay, let me directly do use static files, right? So in this case,
Yeah.
what exactly you want to use? Use static files options.
Yeah, like, can I change the name here of www.root? Like we are using uh,
See,
uh,
see,
web
you are not
builder.
understanding. So in this case, a www.root, it is not a middleware component. It is a folder. And here, this use static files, it is a middleware component. So you need to understand what is the difference between a folder and a component. It is a folder, www.root, its name you can change. But this is a built-in middleware component. The logic is already written. This is a ready-made component available. So you need to use only this one. You do not have that flexibility that you can change this middleware component. If you want, then you can create your own middleware component, right? And whatever the logic they have implemented here, right? That you can create your own static files extensions, right? You need to provide the implementation as per your requirement. Instead of this use static files extension, you can create a different class, right? For example, what I'm going to do, right? Let me copy this code, right? Let me add a class file, my custom static files .cs, right? And what I'm doing here, right? So instead of this, my static files extension, I'm writing my custom static files extensions, right? Instead of a use static files, I'm using my custom static files component, right? So now what I can do is I can create an instance of the static files extension class. What is the name? My custom static files. So that is what you can do, right? Any customization you want, you can do inside that static files, right? Directly. In this case, you are using, right? For example, whatever the changes you want to do, you can directly do inside that class file. The source code is available. It is completely open. You now I'm not using, but it is going to be in the same manner, right? Any changes you want. For example, if you go to this developer exception page, right? Whatever code they have written, you can modify like this. Clear?
Yeah.
Right. So because this is completely, as I told you, the source code is available with you. If you want, you can get the source code, modify it, and use as per your requirement. Clear, guys? Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Right. But as they have already provided, then why you are going to do the same thing? Let use those files directly, right? Instead of manually creating those things, right? By copy pasting, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? So this is how you can use static files middleware component. Any question from anyone related to today's session?
Sir, please repeat source code line count.
Yes. Sorry.
So what is the meaning of source code line count?
So source code line count means, okay, if you want to know the meaning of any properties, right click, go to the definition. What exactly it is saying? Determines how many lines of code to include before and after the line of code present in the exceptions stack frame, right? So what it means if you go to this line, so this is the exception line. This is the exception line. How many lines of code you want to include before and after the exception causing statement. So that is what the source code count. So by default, the source code count is 6, but here we have override that value to 3. So as we have override this value to 3, so by default, so you can see Before this line, this is the statement line of 24, causing the exception. So before 24, three statements are there, 21, 22, 23. And after 24, there are three statements. So the meaning of this is how many statements you want to show before the exception causing statement and after the exception causing statement. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, if our environment
Sorry?
production, then this exception will be not if our environment is a production, then this exception will be not display on the screen, right?
Right. It will not display. See, this is the default, but if you want, then you can also display. Right? For example, let me change this environment to production. Go to properties, open this one, make this as a production. So this is the production environment. By default, if you run this application right now, you will not get any exception information, right? But I want that exception to be displayed. So for that purpose, what we need to do is, right? So what we need to do is, if app dot environment is production, then app dot use developer exception page and pass this parameter. Right now, what it will do, the product environment is the production, and now it is going to display the error details. Clear? So it is up to you, but generally we are not going to display the exception details in the production. Exception we are only showing in the development environment. Clear, guys?
So is there a way to like show a different message other than the static trace?
Yes. That is what we are going to discuss in our coming sessions, right? So instead
Okay.
of showing this, right, how you can move to a generic error page where you can say something went wrong. Our IT team is working on this thing. If you have any urgent, please get in touch with this. We are working on this. We will solve this as soon as possible, right? Any generic error message you can display. But the thing is that but instead of doing this, what I would like to suggest is please try to use exception handling mechanism. See, this in this case, this use developer exception page will only come into the picture, if you have not handled the exception. If you are handling the exception, then there is no issue. Right? In this case, we have not implemented any exception handling logic, right? So that means the exception, what this divide by zero exception is not handled. That means it is an unhandled exception. For unhandled exception, only this developer exception page is going to be work. If you are, instead of unhandled, you should write the code in a proper and better manner so that the application itself handle the exception. Clear?
Yes.
Right?
So if we,
Yes.
sorry.
And Pranay, my question is, for example, for 404 or 500, so we wanted to show our custom pages in the production that will be explained.
Exactly, based
Yeah.
on the status page. For 500, you can show a different page. For 404, you can show a different page, right? For 403, you can show a different page. So that is also possible. That is what we are also going to discuss. Based on the status code, how you can show a different page, right? If you have not registered any page for any specific status code, in that case, you can show a generic error message page also. That is also possible. All these things we are going to discuss in our coming sessions.
Sure.
Sir, one question. Can we use try catch in program.cs?
Sorry?
Try catch block.
Yes, and why? It is completely up to you. See here, you can write the try catch block, right? Here you can see I'm putting this logic, right? This is logic, and I'm writing this logic in this block, right? And here I'm writing if the operation is successful, I need to do this thing. And if the operation is not successful, what I want to display? I want to display something, right? Some exception details. If you want, you can also display. Like suppose I'm writing exception ex. You can write here ex dot message. Right? That is also possible. So in this case, it will not going to display that developer exception, rather than it is going to display whatever the message you have written there, right? Attempted to divide by 0. So this is the exception handling mechanism, and you should know these things. I'm not going to explain what is this try block, what is this catch block, right? How this catch block handling the exception. What is generic catch block? How many catch blocks we can create? What is the importance of a finally block? What is the proper? Can you write try with finally? So these things I'm not going to explain in this .NET Core. This is the pure C# concept. You should know this thing. I'm in our coming session, I'm going to be used directly this concept, right? Once I start writing or once you start developing the actual application, right? In that case, I'm going to use this try catch mechanism directly. I'm not going to explain what is try block, what is catch block, all these things. You should know all these things.
Yes.
Right? Clear, guys?
So one more question.
Yes.
Where should I find all the middle